How's the last 2 weeks been? Good. Okay, good. How our practices been coming? Our vivid attention? You're taking that closer look. Okay. Are we getting to our 10 minutes a day? Trying to?
Okay. I see a lot, maybe. Sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're gonna jump in, and today we're gonna start our second pillar, which is write out a little bit more content. So just some basic information on attitude, and then we're gonna learn about 3 new brain facts. We're gonna add 3 new ones, and do a little quick review of what we've already covered. We know we kind of need to keep listening to it over and over to kind of embed that in our brain, and then we're gonna introduce our 4th practice, curiosity. So the importance of that. So quick review. We know there are no rules, right? There's just guidelines. We talked about that in the beginning. It should be easy and simple. You know, we want to nudge ourselves, but if we're feeling a lot of resistance, we want to let it go and try again later. We know that it's going to take time. You're investing in something that is going to be lifelong, right? It's not going to happen overnight, so we want to be patient. We want to know that it's going to take time. And that we have to be real, honest, authentic about who we are, what we're experiencing, okay? I want to talk a little bit about this return on investment. You know, the impact of mindfulness is great, as you know. At home, it helps us be a better parent, a better neighbor, friend, spouse, son, daughter, community member, and it helps us at work as well, right? Be a better teammate, employee, leader, coach, teacher, volunteer, whatever. Because we know that whatever's happening at home, we bring to work, right? And whatever happens at work, we bring home. It's hard to separate those two. And so the beautiful thing is, and I hope you're on board, I think you are because you're here, but the beautiful thing is it doesn't just help us be a better parent or a better employee or a better friend or neighbor. It starts to have this ripple effect into all areas of our life. And so the return on investment's high. I know it takes some time and I know it takes some work, but you're going to start to see that it starts to really impact every relationship and every aspect of your life. And so, I think the return is quite high. We know, as we've been talking about, this self-understanding plus awareness are key, right? That's how we create lasting change. We have to notice ourselves, we have to notice what's happening, we have to understand ourselves, becoming an expert in who we are. And that's how we create that lasting change. It also trumps self-control. I love to talk about this because we live in a world where we talk a lot about self-control, don't we? It's like just have self-control. We're trying to encourage our kids to have self-control. And well, there's nothing wrong with self-control. The problem is, and the issue is that if we can build self-understanding and awareness, we are going to gain. Ooh, now it's really cool in here. Are you guys cooling down back there?
Yeah, good.
We're going to really build even more than self-control. Because what happens with self-control is that it's kind of like, remember we talked about holding that beach ball underwater in our first class, right? Those harder emotions, we just want to hold that beach ball underwater, and it takes a certain amount of energy to hold that underwater, right? And self-control is kind of doing that. It's putting it kind of in a box or holding it under, and it's kind of denying, right? So let me give you an example. Let's just say there's goodies in the lounge. You guys ever have goodies in the lounge?
Never at Fike, ever.
Yeah, okay, all the time, right? But you're trying to be healthy, right? So this is what you might say today because you're trying to have self-control. No, I don't want that. No, right? The more you think about not wanting it, the more you think about it, the more you want it because you keep thinking about it, right? And it's like, becomes this like obsession of trying to just be like, I'm not gonna do it. And you might be strong today. You might have enough self-control not to eat the donuts today, but what happens next week? or the week after, right? Because at some point, doing this is not going to be as effective as, let's think about self-understanding awareness. First of all, awareness. Wow, I'm really feeling like I want that donut in the lunch. Okay, let me think about this. Let me build some self-understanding. Do I really want it? Am I hungry? Is it because everyone else is eating around me? Is it a social thing? Is it going to make me feel good, or am I going to beat myself up about it afterwards? Is it going to help me move toward my needs, which we'll be talking about in the coming weeks? Just let me kind of figure out, or is this a trigger? Is this like a habit? Or maybe for me, it's like I love a cup of coffee and something sweet. So it's that little sweet thing going with the coffee. Is that it? So it's kind of figuring out what's going on, right? Inside of me and outside of me. So that then I can make a good decision. Maybe I eat the donut. Maybe I, maybe I don't. Hopefully I don't, if it's one of the things that I'm, being intentional about. But I think it's going to always trump this self-control piece, because that's just kind of denying. Okay? So we want to just think about that. We also want to continue finding those micro moments to practice. So has anybody noticed anything about their brain this week? Any awarenesses that you noticed? Anything you learned about how you operate?
With the change of the weather, I think I'm a little more energetic, and because I'm moving more and just feel energized.
I love that you noticed that. I noticed that as well. And you notice it in other people too. There's like this change of weather, like people are just, they have a little bounce in their step, right? Yeah, great awareness. Of course, I think it was temporary, but we can hold on to that, right, for the weekend, the rain that's coming. Anybody else? Yeah.
I'm definitely in a better mood because I'm not holding on to stuff anymore.
Awesome. Very good. Are you putting them in a cloud?
No, I put mine in a rock and I blow them up.
That's right. I love it. Somebody shared, you weren't here last
Yes,
night.
I told him to share.
But they did share. You're the one. Love it.
Thank
So
you,
it's
Jana.
working.
Thanks for sharing that one.
My emotions are too intense for a cloud.
Right.
So I just blow it up.
Blow it up. Get
Watch all
out.
the pieces fly away.
It's funny the way you said it.
But I do it with more enthusiasm.
What I love is that you just made it real. Like you made it work for you, which we've talked about. Like this is just, I'm getting to a place to start. You have to personalize it, right? And so I love that you created something that was unique but beneficial to you, because that's really what it's about. Awesome. Anybody else? Okay, well, we'll just keep going. Let me just quickly review this mental processing we talked about last time. If we can look at these concrete things, our sensations and our early conclusions, we can perhaps re-perceive things. And then if we can look at the meaning and the beliefs and our action, we oftentimes can reframe, right? Reinterpret information so we can see it differently. We're creating that space so we can do that bottom-up processing, right? Instead of just jumping to the conclusion, which we think we know with certainty. And so we want to just keep this kind of top of mind. As we continue to build that self-understanding and awareness, our brain facts are important. So, quick review of our first three that we talked about in the last 3 sessions. Brain fact number 1, we know we work on autopilot more times than not, right? We're going to do what we've always done unless we intervene. Okay, sometimes. Autopilot's good because it conserves energy, right? But we're going to miss important information. We may miss subtle differences. We're not going to be really engaged when we're on autopilot. Brain fact number 2, my brain's an energy guzzler, right? It's consuming a ton of energy. We make our poorest decisions when our brain is out of energy. And brain fact number 3, that emotional tag. We give everything, right? Hopefully maybe you've been noticing that emotional tag. We're going to talk about that specifically today with our attitude pillar. I will tell you, and I love this, so last time I was here, I was barely walking because my back, I don't know if you remember that. Okay, so it was like a whole week and a half, literally, before I started getting better. And I had to give Alan credit because I loved this. This is what I love about teaching too, is that I learn from you just as much as you learn from me. But I was very aware of my emotional tag with my back because I really wanted to get at this, I was just, and Alan and I were talking and I was telling him about how I was so distracted. Like I couldn't even focus on what I needed to do in my day because there was a certain part of my brain that was conscious of my pain and how I was moving and if I was going to move the wrong way. And he was like, Robin, it was consuming so much energy. And I was like, it was. It's amazing. Like I hadn't pulled that brain fact in, but that was exactly what was happening. It was draining me that there wasn't much left for anything else during my day. I was just kind of doing the minimal. I mean, I was given 100% when I was here with you. But all the other time, I was just kind of barely making it, right? And so I love that. It was just another kind of approach to this whole, that energy and how those things can, can suck us dry and impact our day and our lives. So thank you, Alan. Brain fact number 4, I'm going to share 3 new brain facts, this pillar. And we're going to talk about them for today and the next 2 sessions. Brain fact number 4, my brain is a novelty junkie, okay? When my brain's on autopilot, it is easily bored. Because that makes sense. It's just going through the motions, it's doing what it's doing, it's not really engaged, right? And it's kind of bored. When our brain is bored, it looks for whatever is interesting or novel, regardless of the wisdom involved. It loves to be engaged, right? It doesn't really like to be just kind of going through the motions, which is why we gravitate to novelty. Things that are different, things that are unique. Ooh, I might be trying to work here, and there's a conversation going on here, and I just can't help but listen, right? And so, again, brain facts are neither here nor there. There's no judgment attached to them. This is just information for us to be starting to notice. Perhaps you might start to notice that you are distracted by novelty a lot, and so it's just simply catching ourselves. Wow, I'm really having trouble focusing because I keep noticing these other things happening in my office or at home. That's novelty. Wow, great information for ourselves, right? As we become an expert. And so we're going to be talking a little bit more about that the next 2 sessions, but our brain's a novelty junkie. Brain fact number 5. My brain likes closure, okay? It likes to check things off its list because this saves energy. It makes so much sense, right? So we know that all these activities in our brain are consuming energy. So it likes to wrap things up so it can be done. Check, right? Because otherwise we keep spinning on it. And it's using a certain amount of energy when it spins on. It's kind of like your computer. You have all those files open, right? You can't really tell that it's sucking your battery, but we know that it is in the background, right? So we close them all out. Oftentimes, maybe you're like me, these are the things I wake up at 2 in the morning thinking about. Because my brain's like, I'm not done thinking about, I need closure on that, and I don't have it. So I'm still spinning, right? And so we'll talk in the next few sessions about how we might address that. But you might just be thinking about this brain fact as you move forward this week. Brain fact number 6. I can rewire my brain, right? With practice, I can transform it to help me be who I want to be. We know that every time you think a thought, you practice one of the practices, you're helping create that new neural pathway, right? We're actually creating new pathways in our brain. We are rewiring it. We have the ability to do that. Fascinating, right? So we want to keep that in mind, that as we practice, we're actually creating new neural pathways. Okay, last pillar was attention, right? We know that of all of our brain's functions, attention is the most critical. This is just information from our last 3 sessions, okay? We know that we're wise when we can skillfully direct it, right? We've talked about this a little bit. It's skilled when it's intentional and focused, which is our stable, right? Just this. It's intentional and focused. Gently pursue our open attention. Asteroid or cloud, whichever. And when it's observed, right? Which is why we created that space and looked at those thoughts so that we could gain perspective. So we want our attention to be skilled if we're striving to be mindful. This means that we don't fight or deny or suppress the feelings or emotions. Instead, we put effort into changing our spotlight or moving things into the foreground or the background, remember? So we can either shine our spotlight, because we know that whatever our spotlight is shining on is where our life's going to be. We know that we gravitate to the... So just be thinking about that. Or moving things in the foreground. Here was another optical illusion that I thought was fun. You see the face?
Yeah.
I like the saxophone player.
Depending on what you bring to the foreground and background. We can do that with our harder emotions, right? We don't deny or suppress them, we just move them, right? So we want to keep that top of mind. So our stable attention, breathe, focus, return to this present moment, right? Anytime, anywhere, we can just get into the present moment. Anybody still working on this when we're doing this? I mean, because you can do these, along with your new practice, as needed. This is our home base, right? It's building this foundation for us to work from. Then we had our open attention, right? Learning what is my brain thinking about? Notice, label, let go, blow up, float away, down the river, whatever works for you. But we're learning about what our brain is thinking about, but we're also just letting this go, right? Which is freeing. It gives us space to just be and to have peace and just to quiet that chatter that sometimes will not stop. And then, of course, was our vivid attention practice, right? So creating that space, gathering the facts about things, because we know that, remember, we get emotionally sucked into things. And once we're inside of it and our emotions are running the show, we no longer see it for what it is. So we want to create some space so that we can gather the facts and hopefully maybe re-perceive it, right? Change how maybe we're experiencing it. So those were our 3 attention practices: thought, system, judgment, and investigate. So today I want to talk about attitude, our second pillar. Attitude is really about how am I reacting? How am I reacting to things in the world? We have attitudes about everything, okay? And we want to start building an awareness of the attitudes we have, especially the attitudes that are serving us well. Now, this is why it's a personal thing. I don't know yours, right? And you don't know mine. So that's why we have to start building that awareness so we can decide what attitudes that I have that maybe I need to shift a little bit because they're adding to my own suffering, right? And so there's 3 main ingredients to an attitude. The first is an emotion. It's hard to have an attitude without an emotion because our brain will always attach that positive, negative, or neutral label. That emotional tag we give everything is part of our attitude. The second is our belief. Emotion doesn't exist in isolation. We believe there is something we must do about it, how things should be, right? Whether it's our belief from how we were raised or just what we think now. We all have very strong thoughts about how things should be. And then we have our physiological response. So we all carry an attitude in different parts of our body. We can feel it. This is a window to help us understand ourselves, tuning in, right? So those are our 3 main ingredients. Now, an attitude is synonymous with mindset. So what happens is that we have a trigger, and we have this internal response. This happens in a nanosecond. We don't even realize it, right? And then we have our action or our reaction based off that trigger. What we know is that our attitude tilts our judgment without our knowing. It happens lightning speed, and it oftentimes impacts our ability to be in this present moment without judgment, which is why this is so genius. So if you remember, our definition of mindfulness is present moment without judgment, right? So we really can't be without judgment until we address our attitudes. to this present moment, right? So if we can start noticing these attitudes we bring to the moment, we're going to be able to help ourselves be in this place without judgment. So an important key to being mindful. The great news is that by changing only one ingredient, we can change our attitude. Only one. It's not this like crazy change, but it's just a slight shift to change how we experience something. And it makes a world of difference. And just one. So it's very doable, very manageable. So this is what a mindful attitude would look like. We have our trigger. Now, instead of we are aware of our trigger, and instead of immediately on autopilot going to our action or our reaction, we're going to come down here and we're going to decide which one we're going to change. If this is an attitude that I know that this is something I want to shift, right? And now I have a new trigger that creates a new action or a reaction, okay? So let me give you an example. When I started working on being mindful, so I used to use the phrase like, I'm just going to experiment here, you know? And I would just test drive different ideas. And I had started learning about attitudes, and I realized that I had a significant attitude about a gentleman at my church. So, give me grace, I'm not very proud of things that I share with you there, but my lesser than sides of myself. But so this gentleman at our church, our family would go in, and we always sit in our section, right? It's our section. And he kind of moved around. And when we have called him, he has a label, loud singer guy. Because loud singer guy sings louder than everyone else. He sings longer than everyone else. He sometimes sings when it's singing. And loud singer guy. Well, it's fine when loud singer guy does not sit in our section. But I happened to notice, as I was experimenting with attitudes and building an awareness of attitudes that I had, loud singer guy sat behind my family. Okay, well, what would happen with loud singer guy? Okay, pre-mindfulness. Okay, where's our spotlight? On him, negative, right? I would look at my family and they'd look at me, you know, like, oh my gosh, we'd roll our eyes, and we would be so annoyed all through church. We didn't really get anything out of church because we were so annoyed, and then we would leave church and be like, can you believe it? I mean, come on, who doesn't know, right? And I'm not proud of that, it's very hypocritical, I know, but I realized, this is an attitude I have, right? The things we can't control. We have a lot of attitudes about the things we can't control. I can't control loud singer guy. I can only control how I respond to loud singer guy, right? It's all I have control over. So I was like, wow, okay. Instead of me, so whose fault was it that I spent a whole hour that was wasted? His or mine? Mine, right? I would love to have played it on. I'm sure I did for a long time. But with awareness, I'm like, okay, right? So I told my family, I'm like, okay, we're gonna experiment here. Luckily, loud singer guy sat behind us again the next week. And we put in a plan. Now, I will tell you, you only have to change one, but sometimes I'm an overachiever, so I decided to change all three. But you literally, I've done it tons of times since then, and you literally only have to change one. But my emotional tag originally was, right? So it was like, all right, I'm just gonna stay neutral, right? It is what it is, right? My belief, well, originally it was like, who doesn't know the rules of a church? It's church 101, right? You want to sing out, you join the choir, whatever, right? Who doesn't know this? So my belief shift was, maybe he doesn't know, right? Because I think there are a lot of people in this world who are just clueless. They're just unaware, right? I mean, no judgment, just very unaware. And who am I to be judging super happy with him. He's there singing his heart out, you know? And then I'm like, you know, he does have a really good voice. Wow. And then I realized that it was really my issue because I love to sing, and when he's singing so loud behind me, like I couldn't hear myself sing. And so that's kind of where some of my angst was found. And so I just decided to start not singing, just listening to him and enjoy his voice. Right? And so my belief about him shifted a little bit. And my physiological response, honestly, right? There's no need to hang on to that angst. What's the point of that, right? Well, what happened was, as you can imagine, my spotlight goes from him to church, to mass, right? Left. And it didn't happen necessarily. It happened fairly quickly, but it took a little bit of time. And finally, I don't know, it's like I stopped even noticing him anymore, right? I stopped allowing him to control my experience. Because we do this all the time. We allow other people to dictate how we live. And when we know, when we have that awareness, and we have some tools in our back pocket, then we can figure out a way, right, to live the life we want to live, instead of allowing all these things around us to dictate our life. I will tell you, I have literally used this time and time again, from little things to big things to annoying things my husband does. I mean, not that he's annoying, but we all have our things. I know I have my annoying things. To attitudes about other drivers on the road, right? Go back to our first video. Guy cuts you off, right? Huge attitude. To, you know, it's family, it's friends, it's coworkers, it's job responsibilities, it's expectations. It goes on and on, the attitudes that we have. So, so we want to really start thinking about that, okay? Building an awareness of attitudes that we have, and then pausing to think about, is this really an attitude I need? Is it serving me well? And if it's not, now I know what I can do to try and tweak it. So our first practice associated with attitude is cultivating a curious attitude. Curious is searching for more, okay? This means that we search for more than we already know, already assume, and already expect to happen, okay? So what we're doing here is we're taking our blinders off. What happens is, in life, I think, whether it's daily because of our devices, we have this tendency, how many people are living here, right? They're never looking around. They're never, it's like, hello, right? Because they're stuck here. But also, when we go through hardship and challenges, it's our natural tendency to do this turtling in, right? And when we go here, we get stuck in our own thoughts. We start having this downward spiral. We can't see that there's hope, that there's possibility, that there's opportunity, right? And this is the worst place we can be. Now, it's this self-preservation kind of place, but if we can practice being curious, simply being curious, looking around, we might see more. There's always more to be seen. And also, every time we're curious, our world just gets a little bit bigger every single time. And that's going to serve us well. So how do we do curious? We recognize something new, right? Simply look around. We might recognize something bizarre, recognizing something unexpected and unique, something that we maybe hadn't noticed before that was unusual, right? Maybe recognizing something obscure, searching for subtle differences, right? Kind of like our vivid attention of just gathering facts. Or perhaps mysterious, exposing the gap between what we know and what we want to know, asking the question. The beautiful thing is, we don't even have to find the answers. I mean, now, with our technology in our hands, and sometimes I'm like, you know, a question will come up at dinner and it's like, everybody wants to Google it to find the answer. It's like, stop. We don't need to know the answer. We can just be curious about it. So to reap the benefits of curiosity, we don't even have to find the answer. We can, but we don't have to give us the benefit of curiosity. okay? We don't deny, suppress, condone, condemn, avoid, ignore, resist, right? We don't do this, which is why we practice open attention, right? We are just aware without judgment. So we can be curious, but we don't want to attach a judgment or an emotional tag to that necessarily, right? Just being simply curious. So Todd Kashdan wrote a whole book on curiosity and the impact it has on our mental health, on our happiness, on our longevity even. Curiosity actually lights up parts in our brain associated with happiness. We were designed to be curious. We've just kind of fallen into a rut in our world of not needing necessarily to be curious. And I think it just comes with age. You think of the most curious are who? Our little ones, right? They're so curious. In fact, so much so that you go, oh, right? It's why. Some godchildren who I've spent a lot of time with. And it's like,
Can we just stop being quite so curious?
but they are naturally curious, trying to learn about their world and wonder. And then what happens is we grow up and we just kind of stop being curious anymore. We know that as soon as we think we know something, we stop paying attention. We know. Kind of like closure. Check. Done. We don't really pay attention. Right? We also forget how complex persons and situations can be. That phrase actually has been life-changing for me because I think that once we realize that every person we encounter is carrying a heavy load of some sort. We don't know what it is. We may not see it. We may not ever know. But we all have stuff, right? But we have this tendency to want to take it personally. So whether it's the server who didn't give you good service, it's always more complex than what we see on the surface. I think it allows us to give people a little grace, right? We also know that with mindless adaptations, we fall back on boxes and labels, right? Again, we just slap on a label on it, we stop paying attention. Once we label it, we stop paying attention. We do that top down. Oh, art, yeah, I know about that, right? And then we aren't curious anymore. We just go straight to the top, we act or react based on previous information or memories or beliefs or whatever, right? And we don't really notice subtle differences. So I think about this, imagine you are a nurse or you're a patient on a floor, let's just say, a cardiac floor, right, at the hospital. And the nurse is like, yeah, know about you. Been here 1,000 times because that's what I specialize in, right? But yet you're unique. Like I want that nurse to still be curious because I'm not, even though I have a label of heart disease or whatever, what if I'm unique? So I want my nurse and my healthcare team to be curious about me, right? So they can notice things that maybe they're not going to notice with the label. Yep, slap the label on, been here, done that, right? But we do this with kids too. We get ADHD, oh yeah, as teachers, we had a lot of that, and I think that, but we do this all the time. Sometimes we jerk, right? Yeah, he's just a jerk, I'm not going to pay attention anymore, or she is, or whatever, right? Once we label, we stop paying attention, and that's just not going to serve us well. It's not going to help us serve the people around us. So we want to continue to do that bottom-up process. Okay, so we trigger and treat. Simply, we focus on something unfamiliar, right? We want to sustain some interest. Get active, move. Alan likes that. Be your own explorer. Test drive an idea. Open the gaps to the unknown. Ask questions. We are such creatures of habit. Park in a different parking spot. I know that's crazy, right? But don't we all park in kind of the same space, right? Or area. I sometimes will stretch, try to step outside my box and park in a different parking lot on a different side at Target, but then I go out the same side because I'm on autopilot, and then I'm like, where's my car? And then I'm like, oh yeah, I was mixing things up, right? So we have to be intentional. Take the stairs. Take a different route to work. Oh my gosh, we drive the same route over and over. We've stopped even noticing things. So I have a highway, a road that I get to the highway from my house, View High, to get to 470. And I was practicing curiosity one day, and I noticed a whole house. Now, mind you, I've gone down this road. I've lived in my house for 11 years. How many times have I driven this road, and I've never noticed a house? There's other houses I've noticed, but I've never noticed this particular house. How did I miss a whole house? Because we get stuck here. We stop looking around. We stop paying attention. We just stop seeking new information, right? And so, so this is just, it's do something different, right? Mix it up. Remember, our brain loves novelty. It loves for you to mix things up. It engages our brain. Be playful, right? Have fun. Be creative. Let loose, right? However this translates into your life is for you to figure out. The other thing we can do with this practice, well, let's see. Here we go. So we're going to be searching for more. So this practice, it could be you are taking a new ride to work, right? It could be that you look at something that you see every day. So when I do this with kids in the classroom, I'll have them get out a pencil, and for 60 seconds they think of how many questions they could think of about a pencil. They come up with amazing questions, right? Maybe you have something on your desk, because what happens is when it sits there, remember, you don't see it anymore. So maybe you notice something on your desk and you just think, where did I get this? Who gave that to me? Right? Wonder how that's made. Sometimes I look at the plant in my office and think, I wonder how much water it gets. I wonder how big it'll get. How much has it really grown? I don't even know the name of it, right? Should it be fertilized, right? We're just being curious about things we see every day. So we don't have to, this isn't like, rocket science here. We are just either looking for subtle differences in things we see every day, being curious about, or we're just simply looking around and seeing if we can notice something new as we do mix things up in our day, okay? So, how are we doing on time? Oh, we're way over. Nice. Okay, this week, you never know. Sometimes I get long-winded and then I lose track of time and I'll be like, whoa, we gotta hurry up. So this week I want you to notice an attitude you have towards something or someone that isn't serving you well. Okay, that's our first step. We have to notice. You have to start noticing attitudes about anything. Then try to identify your emotion, your belief, or your physiological response, if you want to. First step is really just noticing, right? But then that second piece is, let me experiment. Right? Let me just shift one of those things and see if I can shift my attitude just a little bit. Just enough so that it's not adding to my own suffering. Experiment to see if you can change that attitude by just changing one thing. And then practice being curious 3 to 4 times each day. 3 to 4 times each day. Maybe you're at the vending machine and you're like, I wonder how many times the guy comes to fill it. I wonder how many people buy Skittles. Do you have Skittles in your vending machine?
I don't have any.
Oh.
Unfortunately, that's inaccurate.
Alan's trying to take all of them away.
There's one right next to my office within 7 feet,
I
so.
was gonna say, I thought I
He's
saw
got a taser to keep people away from him.
Not that I watch people buy stuff.
My vending machine's away, I should say.
Okay, well, whatever. You get the idea, right? And our quote to end with is by the wise William James. The greatest discovery of any generation is that a human can alter his life by altering his attitude. And there's my loud singer. Well, it's a girl. And there's my boy, my face going like, what?
You should have asked him why he doesn't join the choir. You have
He
such a
did,
great
well, actually,
voice.
I used to be in the choir and he was in the choir and then he stopped. So I think it's a bit of a tight commitment to be
Yeah.
required, you know? And so, yeah. And of course, I think Alan said, why didn't you move? Now, okay, I will say this, because we are such creatures of habit, like, I say to my family, let's sit in the section and meet with people. No. They don't wanna do
And
that.
it's seriously, when you sit in a different pew, it's like being in a whole different church sometimes. You feel like it. And like you said, you're used to the people around you.
So I want my well, now it's just me and my husband, because everybody's gone, so we technically could do that. We kind of don't. But I'll have to nudge him, maybe I'll step outside the box and get him and we'll.
We have a table that we call our table at certain restaurants.
Yeah.
Because we always sit.
Exactly. So maybe, stretch outside your box, and step outside your box and try a new restaurant. So we've been doing that since we've been empty nesters, is trying to eat someplace different.
We gotta pick somewhere 5 people agree on.
Yeah, that's hard. I hear ya. But even like going outside of, I was in the Lee Summit, so it's like, let's venture down to the Crossroads or downtown. And it's like, it's so cool. It's so fun. It makes me feel good, you know. Actually, we were really wild and crazy, and we went to, what's the band, the motorcycle bar that has all the bands?
Knuckleheads?
Knuckleheads.
Yeah.
We did Knuckleheads. It was so fun. It was so fun, and we were like, we gotta do this more often, because we like that. Our brains like that, right? We just get kind of stuck in the rut of things. So, so challenge yourself this week to be, the next 2 weeks, sorry, to be curious. Yes, Adam?
You mentioned rut, and one of my favorite discussions we've had was the open prairie visualization of pathways, and you mentioned neural pathways that we're reshaping. Could you expand on that since we have a couple minutes?
Yes, absolutely. I can't remember, did we not talk about that here? Okay, you bet. So when we're building that new neural pathway in our brain, if we think about our brain as being like just a grassy field, right? And there's a dirt path in the grassy field. So we come to the field, well, we don't even question where we go, right? We automatically go down the dirt path, right? That's the highway in our brain that we've been using for however many years we've been alive, right? We don't have to think about it, we just automatically use it, right? So whenever we create a new neural pathway, we're in the grassy field and we're going down, we walk a different path. And the first time you walk it, you can't really tell, right? But every time you walk it, it starts to beat the grass down just a little bit more every time. And eventually, if we do it enough, if we walk that new path over and over and over, it becomes our dirt path. And the old dirt path starts to grow weeds, right? Now, we have to keep down that new path because it can be easy to switch back, especially if we're on autopilot. But the stronger that, the more the path becomes dirt, the stronger that neural pathway becomes. And it becomes our default, right? So whether it's a thought about something or an attitude or catching ourselves and not being present, all of those are neural pathways in our brain that we're creating new ones with your practices here. So just kind of a visualization of how it looks in our brain, kind of. So, any questions? Any thoughts?
Can we go back one slide?
You bet. I bet. Hey, that one?
Yes.
And, I try to put in your packet just kind of an overview of the attitude principles. So it's not everything, but it's kind of the highlights of the 3 ingredients are in there. So if you are like, what were those 3 ingredients? They're in there, and then certainly your directions for your curiosity. Any other thoughts, comments?
I have an example of like the autopilot thing. I went to the grocery store the other day, and I usually start in the back, like in the frozen section, and work my way to the front of the store. But I was like, I like to mix things up, so I started in the front and went backwards. And I noticed that a lot of products I wouldn't normally notice, which was fun. But I also noticed that because I was on autopilot, I forgot half my list and had to go through the aisle the second time because
Yes.
I knew what order they should have come in and they didn't that time.
Of course, they love when you do that, right? Because then you're backtracking, and you always try and get us to go different places. I think that's why they're always moving things around, so that we can see new products, catch our eye. I love that. So you like to mix things up, so this is gonna be
Yeah,
easy.
like I hate parking in the same place all the time, or like, I will always like try to sit somewhere different.
Nice. You're naturally curious. Well, might not know it, but you've been practicing curiosity. So I'm gonna ask you to stretch a little bit more, right? So if any of these things are things that we kind of might do a little bit of, we wanna do it a little bit more. So if we're gonna create growth, right, we wanna do it a little more than we already do. So challenge yourself to be curious maybe in some aspects that maybe you typically aren't. Stretch yourself a little bit. Awesome. Anybody else? I see a funny look on your face. No?
She was probably making some honor things.
Oh.
No, I'm old. That's why I park in the same place and know, so I know where I'm going and where.
I know. But this is really good for our brain, and it really is good for, mindful practices are being shown to be very helpful in helping prevent Alzheimer's kind of thing, dementia kind of, not that you have that, but I think. No, hey, I'm right there with you, right?
That's the bus that ran her over.
Yeah. I mean, we all kind of have to worry, not worry, but it's a concern because dementia is something real and happening more and more in our society. And so I think anything that, we can do to, again, be preventative in that, and that is really engaging our brain, keeping it sharp, keeping it active, and I don't have any articles, but someone recently told me that that's one reason they specifically started practicing mindfulness, because her mother had she had a lot of Alzheimer's in her family, and she's like, I read that this is a great way to help prevent that. And I wasn't surprised. I don't actually have my hands on the research, but I could certainly find it if I'm interested in that. But
Well,
but
and
you
she,
can help with.
right, like, at the end of the day, I'm already thinking about what I'm gonna do when I get home, or what I'd have to, what am I gonna make for dinner, or whatever. And you know how many times, if I park in the front parking lot, I'm walking to the back, and I'm halfway there, and everybody knows what you did when you're walking back to your car.
The walk of shame.
Well, and that's what happens when our brain's distracted, because we're here. If we were here, right, if we were in the present moment, hopefully we would remember we do everything. Or we'd at least notice, maybe, I got caught today, instead of just kind of, but we get on that. So we give ourselves grace. We're all a work in progress.
Oh, I mess up all the time, so I
Okay.
give myself grace.
As do I. Anybody else?
Actually, I'll
Yes.
share. Actually, so Monday I had an eye appointment, and some of you may know I've been struggling with vision in my right eye, and I finally, for about 14 months, and we finally had kind of a workaround, and so I went to my appointment, I was feeling really good about it, and then I kind of failed one of my tests, and so, of course, then I immediately, I'm like, swear word, something else.
No.
So I thought, no, just calm down. let's
Judgment,
wait.
attitude.
Yeah.
Right.
Let me see what, Dr. Crowley says, and so I went in there, and she really wasn't that worried about it, so we'll just kind of check on it in 6 months and see how it goes, but, so yeah, so I.
Did you practice your vivid attention?
Yes, exactly.
Love it. Created some space.
Yeah.
And let me just gather the facts before I
Before I start freaking out.
allow it to take me away.
Yeah.
Right? So, love it. Nice. Well, I think somebody else had mentioned that they had some dental work and was a little anxious about that, and just used justice to calm. A variety of people tell me that, because I think a lot of people have a lot of anxiety over the dentist. Understandably, or medical procedures, and so again, it helps with anxiety significantly. So just again, in the present moment, helping us just be in that place of calm makes a difference. Anybody else? Yeah.
So did you do anything else to help your back get better?
Well, I went to the chiropractor like 5 times the first week and then a couple times the next week. Actually, I will tell you, and this is really kind of crazy. And I was stretching and I was icing and heating and doing everything I should. But I had an old chiropractor who had designed this, it was like a prototype of this wedge, and it was kind of this like firm foam, and it was in kind of a triangle. And so I've had troubles with my sacrum before, and it's really hard to, loosen the muscles around your sacrum because it's kind of low. And so I found it in my drawer, and I'm like, so I laid on it and tried to stretch those muscles around my sacrum, and that's what did it. I mean, I still had to get another adjustment. I'm a big believer in chiropractic care. But that was what made a difference for me. Yeah. So it's like, and he never even like patented it. I just happened to be the recipient of his little prototype. And I need to text him. I don't even go to him and say, hey, listen, thank you so much. So yeah. Thanks for asking, but it's amazing how you just don't appreciate, I mean, being able to put your stinking pants on, right? Those people who have back issues, I mean, it's like, wow, turns your world upside down having back issues and then just chronic pain. And I have an appreciation for people who experience chronic pain, on a daily basis. For me, my go-to phrase was this too shall pass. We'll talk about go-to phrases in a couple months, but helping us just to phrase it, help us navigate a moment. And for me, it was this too shall pass. I knew I was going to get better, and I thought, wow, if this was permanent, it'd be tough, to deal with that. Thanks for asking. Anybody else? Thanks for sharing. Conversation.
I'll share something that's less than my best self as well, because last night I was having my back tightened up a little bit, and my boys are self-sufficient showers when they choose to be, and last night they chose not to be, and I just wanted to lay there on their floor and do some stretching while they showered, and I looked at my watch and realized it had taken them 12 minutes to not even get their hair wet. And so I was just yelling and upset and telling them all these things that I wanted to immediately just retract from the air as I'm saying them. And so I went and let them finish their shower, and I went and laid back down. And when they came out, I had to apologize to them and let them know that Daddy was upset, but he was not mad at them. He was just upset with their actions and their decision to not be good showers, and we're gonna work together so that Daddy doesn't have to yell at you again. And it was a great conversation, but I had to realize that my back caused that. I was short because I was not feeling my best physically, so mentally I just didn't have enough rope.
We just react.
I ran out of rope.
Well, and it's interesting because when we think about attitudes, we have attitudes about ourselves all the time. Attitudes about our pain or ways we wish we were different, judgments, kind of, attitudes about things we wish we would have done differently. I mean, you're going to start, when you start noticing attitudes, they're just everywhere. And again, we don't want to berate ourselves, because with awareness, then we get to choose. Because sometimes it's like you'll notice an attitude and you'll be like, wow, dang, really? But we notice, and now we get to do something about it. So, give yourself grace.
You were talking about the new pathways or whatever for doing these things, and I definitely increased my meditation. I found an app I like, and I do it too. You got my husband.
Yes.
But a lot of times I'll find myself struggling for a word that I know, and I can't, and I haven't really done that as much lately. I mean, I haven't found myself struggling to remember what I was saying, like that I'm talking so fast that my mind isn't keeping up, or it's ahead of it, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? I don't find myself doing that as often.
It makes a huge difference.
Well, so I'm sure everything's more arranged in there.
So
Cleaned up the files.
So let me just tell you, and we'll talk about this next time when we review curiosity. So when you're looking at this practice, it's so simple. It's like really being curious 3 or 4 times every day. Like, it's very surface simplistic. But it has really deep benefits. Because what happens is once we're practicing taking those blinders off, starting to look around, starting to be curious about our outside world, we're then going to take it inward. Wow, let me be curious about this sensation I'm having inside. What's that mean that my stomach is in knots? What's that about? What's going on? Let me see if I can notice some subtle difference. Be curious about when I sleep better one night versus another. Huh. Maybe there's some things I'm doing one night that's different than the next night. Or let me be curious about some resistance I'm having, right? So what we're doing is it's simple here, but long term, it really cultivates an ability to bring it in here, right? To be curious about things inside of us that are gonna hopefully lead to our best self. Yeah. Well, actually, on that note, my son, who I don't think I've shared with you yet, my middle son has suffered from severe social anxiety, and for some reason I have a lot of stories about Austin. I was reflecting on that the other day. I'm like, every story I tell is usually about Austin, poor guy, of my children. But he was on anxiety medication, and he recently went to the doctor. He's like, I really want to get off of it. And so they did his dosage in half. But in the meantime, he started doing, and I said, if you're going to wean yourself off of it, you've got to start doing mindfulness meditation twice a day. And so he does his 10 minutes. He does one in the morning, one in the evening. And he's like, I think yesterday was his last day. Now, mind you, he's still a little bit noticing some heart palpitations, which is kind of surprising to him that medication is that powerful in our body as far as that physiological response. But he has been really amazed at how this simply meditating twice a day has made a huge difference.
Well, I'm not brave enough.
And he's only 24.
I'm not brave enough to go off my anxiety.
No. Yeah, no. And for each person. But as you
It
think,
works with me.
if that's something later, and you've built a really solid, maybe it's just a reduction, if that's something you're interested in, it's not for everybody.
That's true.
To each his own, That was just something he wanted to do, and, I'm like, as long as you've got some good habits of, meditation, and I think certainly that's something to work through. So, yeah, I've just been really pleased. Being 24, being committed to meditating, so anyway. All right.
Maybe when I get all the kids out of the house, I can.
Yeah, maybe keep till then. Guys, you have my card in the folder, so between now and our next meeting, as always, reach out to me, share an aha moment, question, maybe you didn't feel comfortable asking today or talking about, but I'm here for you. So we'll see you in 2 weeks.